الحمد لله الحمد لله نحمده سبحانه ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفوته من خلقه وحبيبه، قد بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وكشف الغمة وجاهد في سبيل دينه حتى أتاه اليقين. فاللهم اجزه عنا وعن والدينا وعن الإسلام والمسلمين خير ما جزيت به نبيا عن قومه ورسولا عن أمته. اللهم أحينا على سنته وأمتنا على ملته، واحشرنا تحت لوائه وأوردنا حوضه، واسقنا من يده الشريفة شربة هنيئة لا نظمأ بعدها أبدا. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد بن عبد الله، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. أعاذنا الله وإياكم من النار. In the past couple of weeks, we have been talking about history as an element that should bind our ummah together. We're talking about unity, the overarching theme here, but at the same time, we are breaking it down to its basic elements. Last time, we were talking about language, and today we are going to talk about two more elements that bind our ummah together. But first, let us go back to finish the language issue that we started but we did not finish last Friday. The Arabic language, which is the language of the Quran, which has a universal message, this message, to be communicated fully in its original form, the language has to be as universal as the message intended from the Quran. In other words, since the Quran is sent down in Arabic, this is the language that Allah chose to send the Quran in. And since the Quran is intended to be the universal message for the whole world, Allah is Rabbul Alameen, the Quran is sent and the Prophet is sent as Rahmah lil Alameen for the whole world. The language that carries the message must be as universal as the message itself. Not using the Arabic language broad enough and deep enough, even by the Arabs who are living in their own home native town, still they are running from the language as if it is an epidemic or another SARS or Corona. They are running away from it. The Arabs are using English and French and other languages as if they want to divorce themselves from a language. They are ashamed to use it, even with each other. And as Arabs have always done, which is a process of Arabization. What is Arabization? To get a word or terminology from a foreign language and keep using it in Arabic until it becomes an Arabized word, like words we now use without any qualm or question. We say radio, we say television, right? We say computer. All of these are words that are justifiably need to be Arabized, right? But I don't need to Arabize thank you. I don't need to Arabize have a good day, because we have in our language our ways of saying thank you. Our ways of saying thank you is to say Jazakumullahu khairan. In the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, من قال لأخيه جزاكم الله خيرا فقد أجزل له العطاء. He has been as generous as it should be and as it could be by saying جزاك الله خيرا. So there are words of technological advances that unfortunately we did not introduce. We need to Arabize. We need to accept and accommodate it and use it, or use the alternative. Like some Arabs would use the word al-midhiya for radio, or al-mir'ab or for parking, right? Or garage, al-mir'ab, right? That's okay. If we can find words in Arabic to substitute for those new words, fine. If not, Arabizing has always been a process. The Arabic language and all other languages, they borrow from each other and accommodate and adjust their local language to include those vocabularies that come from other communities. But Arabization, at the expense of losing our own Arabic language, will create a generation gap between the Arabic language that people are using today and the next generation will use a different Arabic language, a language of lull and all of these social media language that is now jumping on us every day. So as much as the Quran is a universal book with a universal message that was sent in the Arabic language to communicate it authentically and in its original language, the Arabic language must be a universal language. But before we jump to universal language and all of these concepts, we need to ask, did Arabic yet become an Islamic language? Did we succeed to even live in Arabic, even within Arab language communities in the Arab world? No, we are not. We are losing. And we'll talk about losing to other cultures in a few minutes when we talk about civilization. The Arabic language is known for its wealth of vocabulary that exceeds any other language. And I want you to look at this screen here. To contrast the number of words in the Arabic language and in other languages, those comparisons have been done looking at the languages that are used internationally, most prevalent languages, and the Arabic language comes with 12,302,912 words. The next most prevalent language, which is English, has only 600,000 words. That's how many times? 21 times? 21 times alternatives for words that are used in the English language. But this does not have anything to do with the fact that if you compare how much space the Arabic language is occupying in the world and how much space English is occupying in the world, you will find that the flip coin is true, that it is 1 to 21. So wherever the Arabic language occupies 1 kilometer, the English language is occupying 21 kilometers square, which means what? We are not barely second. If all Muslims are speaking Arabic, right, and all Chinese are speaking Chinese, we are still way behind, let alone if it's only limited to the Arabs who are talking the Arabic language. So we become way far behind when it comes to turning our language, the Arabic language, into an international language. We're not occupying a similar space. French comes next, 150,000, and Russian comes next. Definitely Chinese is known, 1.3 billion people speak Chinese, Mandarin and other dialects. So the vocabulary of the Arabic language is wealthy enough to cover all what we need to express in the best of ways. Arabic is the most expressive language. We have names for certain things that exceed 10 and 20 and 50 names for one and the same thing. For one and the same thing, the Arabic language wealth is both in naming and in verbiology and in phraseology, in expressions. It's unlimited, almost unlimited. And the value of how many names for one thing we use in the Arabic language, the value is not in the number of names, but that every name expresses and carries one character of the thing you are naming. So if you talk, for example, about the lion, when it comes to the courage of the lion, what do you call the lion in Arabic? Asad. And then there are about 50 descriptive names for this animal. Some of them express his courage, some express his growing up like a cub and then growing up. Some of it expresses the fierce nature when he attacks a prey. Some of it expresses how kind when he is not hungry, how kind to babies of other animals. And many of you, like myself, might have seen videos of lions taking care of a baby baboon after killing the mother. And she takes the baboon aside, grows it, and feeds it until it becomes a full-fledged baboon, and they let it go. So every name for that animal carries a specific character trait that the Asad or the lion is distinguished for. The particularity of the Arabic words and expressions are amazing, and sometimes you see one word in the Quran that you need 2 sentences to express it. 2 sentences. Take the word فَأَسْقَيْنَاكُمُوهُ. Anyone can help me with this? فَأَسْقَيْنَاكُمُوهُ. How do you translate this into any language without making a big statement? It's one word. It's one word. So the wealth of the language that Allah has blessed us with and chose to be the language of His final and last revelation that He promised to keep, and He has kept, and He will keep until the Day of Judgment. This language is very unique. It carried what Allah wants to tell all humanity. How come we are undercutting the language of the speech of Allah and we claim we want Islam to spread about? So now when we want to spread it, in other words, you might have heard what I have heard also a few days ago, that the King Fahd Quran printing complex, they have published a Quran in Hebrew. So for 10 million people, they thought they deserve a book. But where is this book in its original language? They stopped passing it. Mosques in the United States and Europe and other places, we used to get Arabic language Qurans as gifts from the Saudi embassy, right? They are now printing for another community more than their numbers, and it is full of mistakes. Some people counted more than 300 mistakes. Some of it are obviously deliberate, which means this printing of this copy of the Hebrew Quran has not been reviewed thoroughly by any scholar who knows the language and knows what it carries. So Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is given another name. It's called Al-Aqsa Mosque / Temple Mount. Where in the Quran do you find the word Temple Mount? You don't find it. So the danger of translating the Quran from Arabic to other languages is it opens the gate wide open to manipulate what goes in. So if this is what we export of Quran, are we to be trusted with the word of Allah? And this is the heart of the Arab world. This is a nation that has all the facility to hire 10,000 people to get this copyright as they did the original Quran right from the beginning. So there is no excuse that we translate the Quran instead of teaching 6 million people or 2 or 10 or 50 or 100 million people to speak the Quran. In Indonesia, all scholars speak Arabic. Malaysia, the same. So why don't we teach Arabic to ourselves first and speak it, make it the language of sociology, economics, politics, media, make it the language of the Muslim peoples. Then it will reach out to other people. But so long as we are limiting the Arabic language to a khutbah, a class for Muslim scholars to speak language that the audience even do not understand, it's a shame. It's a shame what we're doing. So as much as Russia are very conservative communities that agreed to all of them speak Russian, even though they have a vast 1/6 of the world space is in Russia. The map says Russia occupies 1/6 of the total space on the surface of the land, on the globe. So, and they speak Russian, and they force others to learn Russian. What culture does Russia have to offer? What civilization do they have to offer? So we'll talk about this in a few minutes. So the language of the Quran is so miraculous that, and one of the miracles of the Quran in the language area is the fact that the Quran relied on the Arabic language for the Arabs to understand the Quran. But from there forward, the Quran became the standard for the Arabic language. I will repeat this because I know it can be somewhat confusing. There is no language on earth that bases, there is no book, there is no book, scripture or otherwise any book, that relied on a language to get its message out. And then that book itself becomes the basis and the rule and the grammar and the control reference for the language that it used in the beginning. So the Quran said, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا, right? وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. The Quran has been intentionally and deliberately made in Arabic. Then that Quran becomes the foundation and the measure by which you measure any other book, whether it is speaking in Arabic or not. So if it uses language contrary to the rules in the Quran, it does not get considered Arabic. And this is not because I am a Muslim saying it. It is a standard for Arab Christians, Arab Jews, Arab of any background. They follow the Quran as the source of judgment as to what is Arabic and what's not. This is a miracle. That the book that didn't exist in a culture that's all Arabic culture, that comes to use the language of the culture, and then it replaces anything else, and then that book will become the standard for judging what is Arabic and what's not. Of course, the first one to put the Arabic grammar for the Arabic language forth was Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, one of the linguists of the Arab community, ordered by Umar ibn al-Khattab, which means several years after the Quran was finished. He was ordered by Umar al-Khattab as a Khalifa to pick all the Arabic rules and match it with the Quran and use the Quran as the foundation, because when Allah says that the Quran is sent in Arabic, everybody understood that the Arabic you can capture from poetry or anything else. It could have some words from other cultures, but the Quran, when it says Arabic Quran, it has all purely Arabic text in it that Allah defined as Arabic. Does it mean that it doesn't have a word from Persia or a word from there? It does, but those words have been adapted into the language way before the Quran came down. So they were known as Arabic from before the Quran revelation came down. So the Quran used the Arabic as a vehicle for communication, and then it became the reference for the Arabic language. And we know that the Arabic is very necessary if we need to understand, practice, and keep Islam for our next generation. There is no way that we can let our children learn Islam in any other language and they can teach Islam in Arabic to their own children. They can't. And if we are the generation that will create this gap, the sinfulness of ignoring and neglecting the Quran in Arabic, in 2-3 generations, you will not find a copy of the Quran in Arabic in the United States. If we want to be the generation that brings this about, shame on us if we let it happen. And more shame if we do it knowingly that this is what we're doing. So the language, mostly known for being a communication tool, is also a binding tool. It binds people together. And we know that people love the language that they call the language of my comfort. So if my native language is Urdu, and I am sitting with Arabs and Urdu and other people, my comfort language will come out. It's not going to be English. I will speak my comfort language because at least some people can understand. But definitely, this is not the way it should continue. We should start deliberately learning the Arabic so that we are all reading the same book, understanding the book for what it says, not for what the translator says, and applying the book in a unified way so that it can bring and help us become more united than before. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us understand the importance of this language as a binding element between the members of our ummah in the East and the West and everywhere. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحابته ومن اتبع سنته بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. وبعد, we will move to cover the issue of civilization and values, which are also some of the binding elements that produces one ummah. We spoke about faith, we spoke about history, we spoke about the language, and now we want to continue to cover the rest of the elements that should bring about unity and power through unity to our ummah. Al-Quran talks about hadara in varieties of ways. So to Qawm Ad, the people of Ad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell them that you used to build and you are building, you have the power to build homes and houses engraved in mountains. And they were very powerful also as far as military and other sources of power. The Quran also talks about civilization in the civil sense, in the community sense. The Quran talks about this village in Palestine that used to be Hadirat al-Bahr. Hadirat al-Bahr, from Hadara, Yahdiru, Hadara, which is civilization. It was the epic of civilization laying on the shores of the sea. Hadirat al-Bahr. This village is the village in which the children of Israel were barred from fishing on Saturday, and they were allowed to fish any other day. But the fish comes jumping out of the water on Saturday as if it is saying, "Fish me, I'm here." And they look and they say, "Can't fish today." So what do? They go to their scholars and ask them, "Could you figure a way to resolve this problem? The fish doesn't come any other day but Saturday, and we are barred from fishing on Saturday." So their scholars thought, and they came up with an idea. They told them, "You could throw your nets on Friday, which is not Saturday." Throwing the net in the water is the first step for fishing, right? So they tell them, throw your nets in the water on Friday and don't touch it on Saturday. And when the fish comes, it will jump into the net. Then on Sunday, pick it up. Very, very clever idea. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cursed them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cursed them. And from this story, Muslim scholars have concluded that all trickery is prohibited. You cannot trick Allah. You know what Allah wants you to do, but you find a trick to run around the rule and yet achieve what you want, and you convince yourself, I'm not violating the rule of Allah. We use this a lot, but I'm not here to focus on this. But the word I want to pick here is حاضرة البحر. You read that story in Surah Al-A'raf, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إذ تأتيهم حيتانهم يوم سبتهم شرعا. Their fish comes flying in front of them on their Saturday. ويوم لا يسبتون لا تأتيهم. On days other than Saturday, it doesn't come. So this village is given as an example. This village, before being destroyed and before the people were cursed, it was the epic of civilization. So what is civilization there? It is tools that they have invented. It is buildings they have constructed. It is ideas they turned into implementation for the benefit and advancement of human life and human needs. And the Quran also talks about civilization in the sense of construction. هو الذي أنشأكم من الأرض واستعمركم فيها. It is He who has raised you from the ground up, and He has instructed you and given you the tools to construct and develop wherever you are. So the role of the human is to construct. Now, unfortunately, we talk about the civilization for the first time, the civilization of mass destruction. Not mass construction, not mass development. And from time to time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends us some of His very minute soldiers, like SARS and Corona and all of these infections, just to tell us, you cannot violate my rules on my earth. Be careful. And those soldiers that are used and deployed by Allah prove to us they are more irresistible than before. And they become more resistant than before. Isn't this a threat? It is a threat. Is Allah not capable of executing this threat full force on everywhere that He decides? He is. There's no question about it. So we need to understand that Islam supports civilization, but civilization of values. Values that build human communities. Values that protect life of humans and life of animals and fish and birds and everything else, and supports life that is based on justice. It's based on fairness. It's based on equality. So all of these values are the foundation of Islamic civilization. And this is one element that distinguishes human civilization from everything else. So it is a godly civilization, and it is value-based civilization, religiously founded civilization. It is meant for serving people. You know that the word hospital and hospitality signifies exactly what they say, hospitality. Because the first hospitals that were copied into the European construction of civilization were meant as places where you stay until you feel good. Hospitality is like a hotel, but there was no treatment. There was no treatment. Before that, hundreds of years, Muslims have built what is called mustashfa, the Arabic language here. Mustashfa is where you seek treatment and cure. That's what mustashfa is for. Shifa khana in Turkish. Okay? So it is a place where you seek cure. In Europe, for years, hospitals were only places where you are separated from the community to limit the number of epidemics and the spread of disease, and for you to get some comfort and some help with basic needs until you are cured. So basically, if we look at today's structure of medical services, you could say that mustashfa is only good for flu and cold. But anything else that progresses over time, it doesn't help much. So people were dying in droves while in the hospital. But mustashfa in the Arabic culture, in the Islamic culture, is an institution that is built to treat and cure by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ says, تَدَاوُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ, seek remedies, O servants of Allah. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمْ يَخْلُقْ دَاءً إِلَّا خَلَقَ لَهُ دَوَاءً عَلِمَهُ مَنْ عَلِمَهُ وَجَهِلَهُ مَنْ جَهِلَهُ. Seek medication and remedies, O servants of Allah, because Allah did not create a single disease without creating a cure and a treatment for it, known by some and unknown by many others. So the civilization is based, the Islamic civilization is based on human service, human benefit, human life, human protection. So it is human-centered. As much as it is godly and God-centered, it is also human-centered, which means it is about our relationship with Allah, and it is also about our relationship with ourselves and each other. This is the distinction of the Islamic civilization from others. Then the equality of human value and worth. The Quran clearly says, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. The most valued member of the human society is one who is most mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ, the most honored among you, is one who is more mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the value of humans, irrespective of their background, color, language, ethnicity, anything, the value of human life is one and the same. من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا. He who kills a single soul or spreads corruption in the land, it is like killing the entire humanity. ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا. This is the foundation for Islamic civilization. That if you give corruption to a community, you are committing killing against the entire humanity. If you kill one person, you're not only killing yourself in the process, you're killing your humanity. You are killing humanity. This is what the Quran says. And if you give life to one person, it is like giving life to all people. I don't want to draw a lot of example, but I want to bring your attention to the most civilized nations today are ones who are known for more weapons, with more firepower, and more killing capacity. And when they invade a nation, they don't mind killing innocent people, whether they work in the press or they work in relief or they serve a sick person or an injured person. They just kill them because they belong to the enemy. So in the current civilization, humanity is community-based. In Islam, humanity is universal. It is for every human. And every human has the same value and equals the same worth and deserves the same level of protection and living like everybody else. This is a huge distinction between civilization of destruction and civilization of development. Freedoms and limitations are some ways of expressing the balance in the Islamic system. You can have as much freedom as much as you exercise self-restraint. But you can't have unlimited freedom. Even Western societies that brag about unlimited freedom, they cannot take a word of a Muslim who speaks truth to power. They cannot. They cannot. But they limit everybody's freedom to protect, they claim, to protect a single community. So you can be an Islamophobe and nobody has anything to do with it. But if you are an anti-Semitic, if you speak anti-Jews, then the law comes against you and it comes very heavy. And sometimes we Muslims self-censor each other on behalf of other communities. Shame on those who do that. It's very shameful, but this is the reality. Why? Because we succumb to the Western motto, which is might is right. And if you want to understand the so-called the deal of the century that took away all of Palestine for Israel, go back to this and the same statement. Might is right. If you don't have power, then you lose all what you have. It is like a gang with machine guns jumping on a pop and mom store. And what do mom and pop store do? They will give them everything to keep their life. So giving the whole of Palestine to Israel is a very vivid application to the issue of might makes right. That's not the Islamic civilization. This is Western claim of what civilization it is that they have. And when I say they have, I'm not talking about they versus us. I'm talking about Islamic civilization versus destructive civilizations. That's what I'm talking about. So in Islam, Allah gives us freedoms, but He sets limitations on those freedoms. Rights and responsibilities are balanced, and this is an issue that we need to talk about, but time is not going to allow us. So next time, inshallah, we'll continue. جزاكم الله خيرا. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت. اللهم اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول به بيننا وبين معصيتك ومن طاعتك ما تبلغنا به جنتك ومن اليقين ما تهون به علينا مصائب الدنيا ومتعنا اللهم بأسماعنا وأبصارنا وقوتنا ما أحييتنا واجعله الوارث منا واجعل ثأرنا على من ظلمنا ولا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا إلى النار مصيرنا وإذا أردت بقومنا فتنة فنجنا منها يا مولانا غير خزايا ولا مفتونين ولا مبدلين ولا مغيرين. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فستذكرون ما أقول لكم وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد.